Hey everybody, welcome back to the Risen Empire podcast, where we explore the strange new worlds and unexpected journeys of science fiction and fantasy novels. I'm your host, David, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ethan.
What's up, guys?
And today we're joined by a special guest, our longtime friend, Jared.
Hi.
And we're going to be exploring the first book in Stephen King's magnum opus, in his journey to the Dark Tower, the first book entitled The Gunslinger. Through our palavers, I will be serving as your Dinh and as your guide as we journey with Roland and his Ka-Tet to the Dark Tower. I'm excited about this journey with you two in particular. You two have been some of my longest friends through my life. You are part of my Ka-Tet. These are things you don't understand yet.
No.
No?
What are you talking about?
That's okay.
That's okay. We'll get there.
These are the right questions.
You've heard a lot of these words. You just didn't
I
realize
just want
it.
to see my family again. I swear. I don't.
So for any of you who've read this series, you may know that the first book is not well regarded as the best book ever written. It was, in fact, the very first book ever written by Stephen King. Mm-hmm. And that makes it a little bit hard to read for some people. He was 19 when he wrote it, and it throws people off.
Yeah.
That's where people lose the series. I've taken a lot of people on this journey, and I find that by taking them on the journey, they complete the journey, which is great. So
You say he was 19?
He was 19 years old when he wrote this.
That's crazy.
Right?
I just feel like the content's like suspicious for like a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you're like your buddy Craig wrote some of the scenes in this. Like, dude, you gotta read my book. And he just like handed you like a bunch of like crappy like 7-subject book note paper. And you just started reading that and you read half of the stuff. I feel like you'd probably call the police, or you just wouldn't show up for school the next day at the very least. But
It's like what happens when the family members read it for the first time.
Right. When people you know read that
Dad,
stuff.
read my book.
Stephen King has an interesting mind. Have you read anything else that he's written?
Read, no, but I am familiar with, his more popular stuff from movies.
Okay. All right. So you're at least familiar with him as...
The Shining and yada, yada, yada.
You know the horror side of King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what everybody knows King as. You certainly did before I started taking you on these journeys with King.
That's true.
Stephen King does write some absolutely incredible horror, some of the best books I've ever read in the genre, from It and The Shining through, anything. He's written a number of them.
Yep.
But The Dark Tower doesn't fit into any one genre. And that's the biggest thing about this series that throws some people off. You're not reading a Western. You're not reading a sci-fi or a fantasy or a horror novel or a romance. It is all of those things and so much more. The first book, not so much.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's more a straight Western.
When we do our podcasts, I do like to have a physical copy of the actual work that we're talking about, or something related to it on screen with us. And today I actually do have The Gunslinger. This was a nightmare to find, and a huge shout out to my local library here for finding that for me. The Gunslinger, as originally written by Stephen King, was actually written in many parts, and then published in sci-fi serialized, comics. Mm-hmm. The original structuring of the story was a little bit different than the one you read. Mm-hmm. He put it all together a few years after he had written some of his other works. The Dark Tower was where he began.
Okay.
And for him, Roland and his stories are where all of his other stories have connected to. That's kind of the home base for everything that he does, is the Dark Tower. That is a part of why he went back and rewrote this book many years later. I had you reread or listen to the audiobook for the remastered version, so to speak.
Rewritten version.
Rewritten version.
There you
That's
go.
a better word. The original version right here was almost rewritten word for word. Almost every word, or at least every paragraph in that book was retouched.
Yeah.
Oh.
Plot points were added, little ones. Names were changed. Dates were changed. A couple of other little details were tweaked as well. It made it a much stronger story.
Yeah, I suppose if I wrote something when I was 19, I'd probably want to touch it up.
Oh, yeah.
Once I got,
Oh, yeah.
established.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to rewrite the entire series in the same way. He decided not to because it just seemed like too much task.
It'd be a monumental task.
After doing the first one, which took him a long time. And again, reworked almost every tiny detail of it.
Yeah.
This is one of the more difficult books to find. It is also one of the most commonly stolen books from libraries, which was why my local library network reported 13 of them in system.
Wow.
And only one that was accounted for.
Well then.
Yep, that took forever to find.
Wow.
So again, thank you to my local library.
I didn't realize there was such a seedy underside to library book storage.
It is.
Yeah, that's funny.
I bet you could find them on eBay pretty easily.
You could, but like libraries
They were
often...
stolen from libraries. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Libraries often have rare or early editions, hard to find books, authors that are tough to order online, things like that. Out of print data as well. Shout out to your local library. Go check them out. They're great. So The Gunslinger, I read the first time, this version here. It very well may have actually been this book. Who knows? I read it, I don't know how many times. I was 12 or thereabouts. And to a 12-year-old boy, the story contained here in The Gunslinger is unbelievable. You know, imagine if you'd read this as a 12-year-old.
Oh, yeah. I would, like, hide it under your mattress kind of good. You know, you'd be like, I'm not supposed to have this.
Yeah.
But I want it.
I was just allowed to read anything I could get my hands on. It didn't matter.
He's reading a book, Dak. He's a good boy.
Yeah, exactly. So I have read several thousand books through my life because I was raised by a librarian. So that's kind of where it takes you.
That fits, yeah.
So The Gunslinger was one of the first books by King I ever read. And I loved it. I read it many, many times. And then later read The Drawing of the Three, the second book, before I discovered that there was a rewritten version of the first. Went back, reread that,
Right.
and have since gone on. I have read this series in totality at least a dozen times. 12 full times I've taken this journey with Roland and with his Ka-Tet. And that is why I'm here to serve as your guide. I have read every connected novel that King has written to this series at least twice, most of them 4 or 5 times, with the exception of Insomnia, because that one put me to sleep.
I gotta go.
It's partly a pun, but it's mostly just that book bored me to tears, so I can't do it again.
It's a cure for insomnia.
It seemed to have been, yep. So before you got into this, what did you expect out of this book?
Well, I mean, you told me in a summarized form a lot of what you just told me now. More so that, you know, the book was really trying for something, and it's not necessarily an easy book, and, you know, you shouldn't just take it at face value. And beyond that, you told me not to really look into it too much, you know? So I was diligent in maintaining my ignorance. I didn't even know what the second book was called until you just said it there.
Excellent.
Good.
So, yeah, very limited expectations, but I was ready to see what it had to say on its terms, and I guess I did.
Great. You have read through this series now at least twice, if not 3 times.
3 complete run-throughs.
3 complete run-throughs.
With a couple other rereads of random portions here and there.
Yep. Some of the books stand very well alone.
They do.
Wizard and Glass. Some people's favorite story. Some people's least favorite story. We'll get there. Now that you've read the series a few times, I want to stay away from spoilers for the moment.
Yeah.
We're going to get very deep into spoilers on this book here in just a few minutes, folks. So if you haven't read it, you should probably stop soon and go read it. It's a great book. But as I had warned Jared...
Jake kills Dumbledore.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. So as I had warned Jared, and as I warned you when you started reading it, and everyone else I've ever taken on this journey, it is very, very easy to find spoilers for this book in unexpected places. When you look up why it was rewritten, for example, you'll find details that ruin the plot of the entire series. I had one friend who took this journey with me who looked up what a certain plate looks like. Some of you may know Ryza. And was able to spoil a major plot point from much later in the series. So when you do read these books, if you can maintain your own blanket of ignorance and just let the story tell itself to you, you will be so much more rewarded by all of it. And I think that you have now seen that.
I have, yeah. A long time ago, the first time I attempted to read this book, I did not finish it. And I attempted it a couple times because it's pretty dry.
It is.
It is a very dry book. Once I finally, he convinced me after many, many years of trying to get me to read that book. I finally did. I made it through to the end, and we'll get to the end, but the end hooks you. And I finally read the rest of the series, and I couldn't put down any of the subsequent books. Metaphorically, they were audiobooks, but
Yeah.
I couldn't stop listening to any of the subsequent books.
So I was lucky that I didn't have to wait a long time for these books to come out. The last one came out, excluding The Wind Through the Keyhole. We won't be reading The Wind Through the Keyhole. We might do that after. But it's
a connected story.
It's a connected story, but it can kind of spoil some elements later in the series. So I didn't have to wait for those last books. The last ones came out right as I was finishing the series. So I was lucky that way. But the time frame between some of these novels were many, many years. I do have some notes here, folks, so don't mind me staring down here. The overall story contained in this book is the same that it's been since the beginning. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Everything from there, the major plot points all still fit. In every version of this book that he's written, in every way that he's done it. But in the revised version, he made it so that it fit better with the flow of the rest of the series. And he made it a more enjoyable experience because of that. You had an unfortunate experience listening to the audiobook for this one, and only for this one. So the narrator for this book is excellent. He's great, and I really enjoy his work.
Anthony?
No, his name, George Goodell? Or did he do the...
George Goodell. Sorry,
Yeah,
Pierce Anthony
yeah.
wrote the book that I was thinking of.
Yeah, so no, George Goodell did the first book.
Okay.
It's a different narrator for books 2, 3, and 4. Because the original narrator who narrated this version and then did 2, 3, and 4 was then unfortunately critically injured in a motorcycle accident and was no longer able to perform.
Gary Busey?
No. I actually don't have his name here offhand, and my brain is not recalling that right now. We'll get there.
Just flash it up on screen.
We'll flash it up on the screen.
We can do that.
It'll be pretty. So, the recordings of books 5, 6, and 7 were all done by the same guy who just did the one that you read.
Oh, okay.
But for whatever reason, at a much higher quality. Then he went back a few years later and did The Gunslinger. And I don't know why, but the audio version, the quality in that recording is terrible.
It's really not good.
It makes it very hard to focus on. It makes it very hard to listen to. So I'm sorry you had that experience.
Do you mean like performance-wise? Or?
No, like audio quality. The recording
the
itself
bitrate
was
quality.
not great.
You know, I didn't experience that really.
Yeah?
I got the Audible audiobook version. I didn't really have much of an issue.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's actually great to hear.
Yeah.
I find the audio from that first story to just be frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
I
guess out of context, you might not notice.
Yeah.
Because we've been comparing it to the subsequent ones, which are much higher fidelity audio.
Yeah. I have also listened to the audiobook of this many, many years ago when you can still find it. I listened to the audiobook and read the book at the same time because it seemed like an interesting thing to do, and did that through the entire series during one of my read-throughs. So I really have learned a very great deal about this. And I'm really excited for you to come along with us. So from this point forward, folks, we're going to start getting into the spoilers of the book.
You said 7 books? I haven't read 7 books in my entire life.
I know.
All
Your
right.
mother asked me to do this for you to make sure you're still
I told you to stop talking to her.
So, from here on, folks, we're getting deep into the spoilers of this book. We, mostly you, got to stay away from spoilers for the future books.
Don't worry, I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
I'm going to try and cordon that stuff off in my mind and only focus on what happens in this book.
If you see him wince and there's a hard cut, I kicked him. So, we begin the book with the line, "The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed." And that sums up what we are experiencing at the very beginning of this story. We meet a man in the middle of his story. We do not meet him at the beginning like you would in a normal novel.
It's true.
All we know is that he is in the desert dehydrated, ready to collapse. He mentions that if he were one of the many holy folk, he might be able to go even farther into dehydration, but he can't. So he collapses. And after he collapses, he has a memory of meeting a farmer named Brown and his bird Zoltan. What did you think of Brown and Zoltan?
If you can recall anything about it.
Yeah, I remember just being kind of like, okay, mister, whatever you say. That sure is a funny horse kind of character, you know?
Yeah. Like,
Please don't kill me.
Yeah.
I just want to be here when you leave.
I just want to farm my dust and my mud, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
But him as a character, I don't really remember a whole lot.
Your mule passed on, Zoltan at the eyes. Great line.
Yeah.
So while he's with Brown, Brown mentions that the man in black had been there not that long ago. The gunslinger's closer to the man in black than he's ever been. And he asks Brown about his time with the man in black. He tells him that the man in black terrified him, produced a cooked rabbit from his arm, uncooked rabbit, scared the hell out of him, and then left.
So he's just like a schizophrenic magician at this point.
That's not a bad descriptor, actually.
Yeah.
That's pretty close.
Drive-by rabbiting in the middle of the desert.
So then Brown asks Roland, the gunslinger, where he came from, how he got out to Brown's farm. Says that he passed through a town called Tull. And he tells Brown about his time in Tull. How he met Allie.
Which is very eventful.
It's very eventful.
Especially if you lived in Tull.
Yeah, right? Biggest blowout of the year.
Oh, yeah.
So he tells Brown about his time in Tull, where he meets Allie, the woman at the bar, and he learns about Nort.
And he eats 4 hamburgers keto style, no bun.
He does.
Yeah.
He does, yeah.
He's all about max gains, you know.
He's an interesting
He's
character.
a keto cowboy, I tell you what.
Isn't he an interesting character, though?
He is one of the more... he was... I was going to say designed. He was modeled after Clint Eastwood.
He was.
Yeah.
He was very heavily
That's how I
modeled after
imagine
Clint
him.
Eastwood.
So,
Yeah, dead on.
head canon, 100%
Yep.
intact.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
He was very heavily modeled after Clint Eastwood.
Yep.
I loved the No Name trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephen King was also inspired by Lord of the Rings with the journey, getting from point A to point Z, and having that journey with your characters. And that's one of the things that Lord of the Rings does very well, is that you experience the journey with the characters.
Yeah.
It is why it has lasted as long as it has. And it's still regarded as one of the masterworks of fiction. Because you spend the time with those characters like they're real. It isn't just this happens, this happens, this happens. You hear about their breakfast
Yeah.
9 times or something.
You know, one thing I noticed is that I don't think throughout the entire book does the perspective break from that of the gunslinger. It's always his perspective, which I like, and it really adds to the whole journey thing. And it really is not necessarily a straight line, but a large shot across the continent throughout the book.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah,
It is. The whole series is all about movement. Moving from place to place, never stagnating. And he never does. Every time he stagnates in the series, people die.
That's not wrong.
I can't talk about that. So there's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sorry,
going to be...
but
wait a minute.
I got to be careful here because I know all. So this...
You know all.
I do, at least in terms of this series. I would pit myself up against any of you. I got this.
can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Of course.
I would say like that first, vignette where he's walking through. I got my first hint that like the world wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't just some like Wild West thing. I thought he used a lot of first of all, it was very masterfully laid out in the very entrance of describing the desert and the quality of the dirt and everything.
It's
And
the apotheosis of all deserts.
which I looked up today means like it was a really fucking big desert.
Yep.
And so, he was using a beautiful language, and it said he was traveling across a highway. And I just took that to mean like a literal highway, like a modern like I-95, which could be wrong, but I was like, I thought something popped in my head saying that this is like post-apocalyptic.
Okay.
Like this is, our world, but gone wrong, and it's the future. I can't really defend that at this point.
No,
with my knowledge.
we love these ideas. This is good.
And then it was further kind of entrenched when he went into that bar. The first thing he did in Tull, and they were playing "Hey Jude" on the piano. I was like, all right, well, some sort of time fuckery is occurring. Can I swear?
You can.
Yeah,
We'll bleep you out.
All right, there was like
We don't need to bleep.
there was a gun abortion later, so I figured it was cool. But I don't.
Yeah. This is already mature content. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's king. I mean,
Yeah.
if you've read it gets graphic.
Yeah.
We won't go quite there.
So yeah, so that was my first thoughts going in, and also the way he talked about the Man in Black, it really kind of set the like. Anytime I read listen to a book or read a book, and it's just like a dude somewhere and there's fuck all around.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually the author, in my opinion, trying to say something about the nature of reality, because it really strips away everything, and you have just kind of like the base forces of things that act on each other, and you really kind of see him as this, this indomitable force moving forward, chasing after this sort of shifting Man in Black, and then everything else is sort of, stripped away.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of really helps you focus in on a story, and I like that. I like that kind of thing.
I do too.
It's kind of like myth, and it felt kind of biblical, which as I read on, I realized is probably on purpose.
Yeah,
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen King was raised in a very religious household, and his mother would call a lot of the books that he read trash. She'd let him read them. He, as you may have probably guessed, didn't have a lot of restrictions. Supposedly he saw a train crash as a child and saw a lot of people unalived. And
Yeah, that could have.
Left in
That
addiction.
explains
That could
the
explain
book
some
at
things,
19. Yeah.
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 He actually wrote it more when he was 17, 18. Published
Oh.
in serialized form the first time at 19.
And I don't think there's such thing as like a fender bender when it comes to like a train crash.
No.
I think it's like accordion or nothing.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Same with airplanes. We learned about how those work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in The Gunslinger, once he reaches Tull, sorry,
That's all right.
didn't mean to kick you that
You're-
time, I'll
you're
let you
good.
know.
You're good.
So once he gets to Tull, and he's telling Brown about his time there, he tells him about how the Man in Black brought a man back from the dead. Nort.
As you do.
Nort the Weed Eater. You remember that scene?
Yeah.
Jumping back and forth over him,
Mhm.
spitting on him.
It was like Weekend at Bernie's. This guy just stiff in the corner of the bar.
Yep.
I think every town bar has like a guy like that.
I mean, it's probably required.
Yeah, like to get your license,
Yeah,
liquor license.
yeah, I would imagine it's a part of the requirements there. So, Nort comes back from the dead. Now, he hears about this from Allie while he's in bed with her. She tells him about the time that the Man in Black was there. So the whole story is being told backwards. Did you catch that?
No.
Starts in point A, or it starts at point D, and then he remembers point C, meeting Brown, and then he remembers telling Brown about his time in Tull, and he remembers Allie telling him about her experiences.
So the gunslinger has ADHD.
Yes.
Well, King does.
Yeah,
Oh.
but it's a story within a story within a story within a story.
Yeah, because the Man in Black also tells a story while he's in Tull.
That's
We don't
true.
need to get quite into that.
That's true.
So the Man in Black tells, before he leaves a note for Allie, telling her that he put the answer to death in Nort's head, and that all she has to do is say the word 19 to him. Say the word 19, and you'll unlock those secrets.
It seems like it would qualify as a dick move.
Yeah.
You just can't count to 20, without like unleashing the knowledge of life and death upon yourself and like melting your brain.
And that's why the Man in Black left it there. And I love the last line of that letter is, "Have a nice day." Fucking great. So the Man in Black is clearly set up as a wizard, as a
Sorcerer.
sorcerer. That's a better word
Yeah.
for it, I think.
His name's Walter, right?
Walter.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's too early to say that, but we already
No, go ahead. We're in the
was
spoiler
Walter
part now.
O'Dim.
Walter O'Dim. Very good catch.
Yeah. So
Good catch.
I realized that he reminded me of someone I've encountered in media before, and it was Gaunter O'Dim, who is he's part of the Hearts of Stone DLC of the little game called The Witcher 3.
I don't think that inspired King 30 years ago, 50 years ago.
No,
Could
but
have been
King
vice
inspired
versa.
them, and it was
Yeah,
confirmed by
probably.
them.
Actually,
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was also there was some like myth in Holland, I think, that had a similar thing. He was the man of glass, so he'd make you bargains that would backfire on you. So
Oh, cool.
he'd give you wishes, and then he'd extract his pound of flesh through some contrived, horrific turn of events that would affect your life.
The Witcher
So-
The Witcher could like almost fit into the Dark Tower world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it actually
they're kind of kindred in that they both borrow from a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the Dark Tower has gone on to inspire a lot of works in a lot of ways that you probably don't see yet. We'll
Nope.
get to that later.
You will get to that.
So, his book, King's book, The Dark Tower, was actually inspired by a 1852 years. Was inspired by a long-form poem written by Robert Browning in 1852 called "Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came." The inspiration's really subtle, but you can track it.
He's really bad HDD.
Yeah, no. He loved those stories. He loved the stories where people are exploring and going from place to place, and he wanted to write his own epic. He wanted to write a story on the same level as The Lord of the Rings. Have you read The Lord of the Rings?
Nope.
They're an interesting read.
They are.
Not necessarily my cup of tea, but great read.
They're a slog.
So while he's there in Tull, he meets Sylvia Pittston, the amazing priestess, I suppose we'll use that word.
It's an interesting
of
word, but
Tull.
okay.
She certainly is great.
Isn't she just a hell of a character?
Oh yeah. She's,
How was he described? How did he describe her? Her thighs were like marble?
Yep, thighs were like slabs of marble.
Slabs of marble.
Is that good? Is that bad? I don't understand.
I don't really know either.
I'm concerned.
Yep. So he finds out that Sylvia Pittston was impregnated by the Man in Black and left with some sort of demon seed. And she believes that it will be basically like the second coming or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you had remarked on this part of the book earlier. Go ahead.
At some point?
Oh, well, they had a very nice time. They sung some hymns together.
They did. And then Roland handled the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
He gave her Plan B with his revolver
Yeah.
in the vagina
Yeah.
Yes.
with the gun.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, he did.
He sure did.
He did.
I don't think that's FDA approved.
I
Probably
don't
not.
think so either.
No.
No.
So he goes and grabs his mule and starts trying to head out of Tull when he is ambushed by all of the people of Tull.
Yeah.
And very first out of the doors is Allie. She's said the word 19 to Nort, and he has told her the secrets of Dad. And she tells Roland to kill her.
You think that's why he chose 19? It's because the author was 19 when he wrote this?
I
Could be.
never thought of that before.
Because
Could
I
be
was
a part of it.
racking my brain, like, why 19? It's a fucking book. It's got to mean something. The fucking asshole and his mystical shit. I was like, what does that mean? What the numbers? Mason. Yeah. Also, like, the whole town goes, like, full, like, hillbilly horror.
Yeah.
Like, instantly. They're all, like, just fucked up and just ravenous and, you know, like zombies in a way, which
Kinda,
is
yeah.
weird. And, you know, we skipped over this a little bit. Like, in the church, it was, you know, their sermon was, like, very kind of extreme. And, you know, she was... you know, talking about the serpent and the Garden of Eden and everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, implying, I think, that Roland was the serpent, you know, that he's the interloper and everything. And, but it's also kind of like perverted, you know, everything in the town. Because it's kind of like they, you know, they think they're kind of honoring God or, doing the right thing, but they've actually been corrupted themselves and they're blinded to it, and
They've become zealots.
yeah.
They are completely brainwashed cultists at the whim of Sylvia Pittston.
And how's that play out for him, Cotton?
So Roland lays waste to the entire town.
Yeah.
Kills them all.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah.
Not just the men, but the women and children too.
Yeah.
And he really does.
Roland's very progressive. He doesn't discriminate.
He is an equal opportunity employer of
Interloper.
death. Yep.
He interloped the fuck out of that town.
And so then we catch back up with Roland where we met him at the beginning of the story, where he awakens in the desert. And he meets Jake at the way station. What did you think of Jake when you first met him?
It's kind of like suspicious of him. Because, like, I don't know, like he got...
Because he's just there out of the blue.
Yeah, he's just like some, like, little newspaper extra read all about it kid.
Right.
In the middle of the biggest fucking desert that was ever there. And he's just like, okay, mister, you want to hang out? Like, I don't know my dad. Will you throw the ball for me? And he's just kind of, just chilling.
Yeah, you can see that he falls.
Ominously with his little blue boy eyes. I don't.
Yeah.
Jake falls in love with Roland right away.
Yeah.
Sees him as a father figure, as a protector.
Oh, didn't we?
I mean, sure.
Yeah.
There are some who might call Roland an antagonist. He did just murder an entire town when he could have just left.
They attacked him.
They were throwing rocks at him.
Yeah, but they wouldn't
That's
have
lethal
stopped.
force.
Yeah.
I suppose. I love the descriptions of the way he handles his guns, though. It's a big part of why I encouraged you to read this series. I always thought you'd enjoy that.
Yeah.
And it is one of the only good things from that movie. Don't ever watch the movie.
Okay.
Trash. Bad trash.
I love trash.
No, not good trash. Bad trash.
It is bad
The
trash.
worse the trash, the better.
The
trash.
worst of the trash. The
So good
worstest of it. Did you ever read Aragon as a kid?
I tried. I have the book.
Okay.
I was like, is the dragon blue or just
Just a
book?
terrible adaptation example was all I was going to bring up there.
Oh.
No, the first movie of The Gunslinger was just god-awful and shouldn't have existed, and we won't get into why until later, but we will talk about it, for sure.
Yeah, we're going to have to get through the rest of the series before we can talk about that.
Yeah, have to, because of the way they structured that damn movie.
Yep.
So, he wakes up, he meets Jake, and Jake tells him that he had seen the man in black there. And Roland hypnotizes Jake. And I love this scene. This is one of my favorite scenes from
the bullet on the
series.
fingers.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
bullet on the fingers. I love the description of that. And I love the story that Jake tells, because it's the first time that this story really gives you a hard left turn, where you're not just in some apocalyptic desert in the middle of nowhere. Now you're following some 10-year-old kid walking through New York City,
Yeah.
getting shoved under a blue Cadillac and crushed to death.
Yeah, that happens. It's tough.
And
Tough city, New York.
so right before he dies, he sees the man in black lean over him and say, "Let me through. I'm a father.
I'm a priest.
I'm a priest." An act of contrition. And then Jake wakes up. And I love the part where Roland says, "Do you want to remember this story when you wake up?" And he goes, "No, that was awful. I could taste my own shit." Dark line, but
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. It's
Honesty only a child could deliver.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Roland and Jake decide that they're going to travel on. Jake is going to come with Roland because the fuck else is he going to do?
Right.
So Jake tells Roland that there's this basement. He thinks there's going to be food down there, but it smells bad, so he doesn't want to go. He's scared. So Roland goes into the basement. And while he's there collecting food and he sees the mutated spiders, he also encounters the speaking demon. Do you remember the speaking demon?
No.
So we were supposed to record this like a month ago, and there have been some scheduling issues and some technical issues that have delayed this whole thing. So hence why he's not super fresh on it. So he goes into the basement and he hears scratching from the wall and dust starts to fall. And he hears a voice and it reads him a prophecy. And it says, "Go slow past the drawers, gunslinger. For while you travel with the boy, the man in black travels with your soul in his pocket. So Roland starts to think that this boy was left here as a trap. Just like Tull was a trap. To get him to get comfortable, get lazy, so that the town could rise up against him and try to kill him. The man in black is setting all these stops for Roland. And then he hears this prophecy. So the two set out from the way station towards the mountains. We follow them for several days. They see some campfires left behind by the man in black. They drink some water. That's really all that happens for quite a while in that book.
Yep.
Yeah, it was kind of a long stretch where they're just kind of against the terrain. Mm-hmm. The terrain begins to change, though, which is a change for the book as well. They finally start emerging from the desert into like this mountainous region. It makes it seem like they're going like east to west across the United States, you know? Just kind of hit the plains and then the desert and then the mountains and then, you know.
Yeah, so they're hitting the mountains.
Actually, I didn't think of that. That's interesting.
They hit the foothills.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they reach into the mountains, they stop for the night. Jake awakens in the middle of the night, summoned by a succubus, a sex demon, who then tries to take Jake until he's not there. Roland saves him in the middle of it, drags him back to camp, ties him up, and gives him the jawbone. Remember, when he left the speaking demon, he reached into the wall and he said that he was taught by the greatest of his teachers to take the dead from the dead. That was Van A. So he takes this jawbone because it's supposed to be good luck. Powerful talisman. Mm-hmm. He leaves it with Jake while he goes on a mescaline addled fugue to go and meet this sex demon himself.
Yeah.
As one does.
For the night, you know.
Yeah.
Right, why not?
You got to be ready for the club.
So, Roland hears yet another prophecy from the succubus. The succubus adds a little bit to the prophecy and to the story. Tells him that 3 stands at the heart of his quest. 3 is the number. Not 19. That's an important number.
I was so mad when I saw the letter number 3 because I was like 3 fucking divided by. I had like a piece of paper, red yarn on my wall. It was a bad look.
19 is a prime number. Even if it primes backwards. So after he spends his time with the succubus and she tells him his story, he smells different things. She pretends to be different people to try to get his story. Finally, she tells him that she'll only give him this prophecy if he sleeps with her. So he finally agrees to have sex with the sex demon.
If I have to.
Right. And then he and Jake continue on. They're finally getting closer to the man in black. They can see him in the mountains. Right there. Not too far away at all. They've been drawing inexorably closer through their entire journey. Once they reach near the top of the mountains, they find a railway. And they board a tram. A little hand cart, actually.
Hand cart, little things you push.
Yep. Good. Push again. So
I think I figured something out.
What's that?
So when they catch sight of the man in black, Roland immediately opens fire on him. Mm-hmm. And for what seems like the first time in the book, he misses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, what's the litany of the gunslingers?
How do you mean?
It was the sort of mantra that they had to repeat during training.
Oh.
I shoot not with my hand.
But with my eye.
Mm-hmm. Goes all the way through, yeah.
And then
I killed
forgot my dad.
Heart.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. In order to shoot with my mind.
Yep. For a gunslinger who shoots with his hand has forgotten the face of his father.
So
there's a lot in this book about faces of fathers, which is interesting because King did not really know his father.
That is fascinating.
And the whole thing kind of seems like, you know, the primordial myths of the Bible, but God isn't there. You know, in a way. You know, like it seems like the Garden of Eden and then coming up, you know, like just going down into hell and going up on the mountaintop and sacrifice, and we'll get to that. But,
Yep.
you know, but it seems like, you know, like the throne is empty, so to speak, you know.
Okay. It's the same question that the man in black asks Roland at the end.
Oh, okay.
Who's at the top? If you get to the Dark Tower and you open the door at the top, who's there?
Jeff
Right.
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos.
Not Jeff Bezos.
He wishes it was him.
All right.
Yeah.
For sure. Could be Gan.
He could be on his way for all we know. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So, while they're on this handcar, right? And to address your point, yes, there's a lot of biblical references, a lot of biblical themes through the series. Not just as explicitly stated in their time in Tull, but throughout the entire saga.
True.
Again, he drew from a lot of inspirations for the story from everything that he could. And as you go through it, you'll see there are elements from any form of fiction, mythology,
Yeah.
anything that you could find.
Question: do you think he missed because he was distracted by the boy?
It's a great question.
Because his
Possibly.
mind wasn't all like, you know, because there's some supernatural nonsense occurring with him shooting. I know, like he's. I don't recall. Did they ever kind of go into more detail about his reloading trick? Because it just says my hands did the reloading trick, and then they reloaded.
No,
And
it's
it doesn't
just
say
this.
anything.
It's that he has this down to such a rote memorization.
So
Such-
he's just like he's so fast, it's
he's
almost supernatural.
so
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
second nature. He doesn't have to think about it anymore. He's like an athlete that spends every waking minute working on their craft.
Yeah.
All right,
That's
I
how
can
you
dig it.
become the best at anything.
Yeah. He shoots so fast you can't even see his hands. It's said a few times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Roland was not the smartest, not the bravest, not the strongest, not even the fastest of foot. He wasn't the best fighter. But he could always haul a gun faster than his mates.
Okay.
Verbatim. So they get into the handcar and they start pushing. And while they're there, Roland tells Jake the story of his trial of manhood. We learn that Roland actually comes from a totally different world than the one we've seen so far. He comes from a world of peace and light. That's how he keeps describing the world he left behind. A world of light. Now in a world of darkness that has moved on. We learn that while he was young, his father was actually effectively the president of the gunslingers. It wasn't quite that complicated. It wasn't a voting thing. They basically just drew a rock. The one who drew it was in charge for the year, and he had to bear all those responsibilities. His father was famous, very rich, and they came from a very well-to-do part of the world. So his mother, it turns out, has been cuckolding his father, sleeping with his court wizard, Martin. And Martin, while Roland's father is out, intentionally tricks Roland into coming in to see the bites on her neck to figure out that she's been sleeping with the wizard. To try to goad him into an early trial of manhood. Because in their culture, as a young gunslinger, you've got two choices. Face your trial of manhood, or face a life of
Exactly.
obsolescence. Nah, we're not there yet. They do have the option not to take the trial at all.
Okay.
And some do. They become, how does he describe it exactly? Perfumed diplomats.
Oh.
Is an often cited role for people like that.
Okay.
But if you decide that you're going to take your trial of manhood, you have two choices. You're either going to win or lose. If you win, you beat your teacher. That's how it works. Those that win are allowed to become full-blown gunslingers. They become apprentices first, and then they graduate on to become gunslingers. They move on with their society. Those who fail are sent west with nothing. They are forced to leave that trial immediately, head west, and they're never allowed back in Gilead, permanently exiled. Roland after encountering his mother and his mother's boyfriend, goes and confronts his teacher, Court, tells Court that he wants his trial of manhood now. Young though he is, he's only 14. And Court says, fine, we'll do it. Gives him 3 chances to bow out. He does not. Roland is ready. He wants to kill this guy. He's done. So Roland decides that he's going to use a very special weapon
I remember.
to defeat his teacher, Court. As a young boy, this always stuck out in my mind. I don't know if you've ever read Frightful's Mountain, but
No.
a strongly inspirational book for me. Part of why I loved survival craft so much and wilderness survival and stuff like that. Frightful's Mountain, very short synopsis about a boy who finds a falcon egg, raises a baby falcon, and it becomes like his falcon. So in this book here, the falcon's name is David. So it stuck out to me as a kid.
Understandably so.
And David is the first of very, very, very many people to die in the gunslinger's wake. David sacrifices himself to kill Court. This whole scene here is probably what made this book
Not to kill Court. But to win.
not to kill Court, but to
win the
to beat him.
Yeah.
I mean,
He was mauled pretty
almost
well.
kills him.
Yeah.
It takes like
Pretty
weeks.
good.
Yeah.
Not for lack of trying.
Right.
Yeah, it's weeks of recovery.
Yeah. No, the Hawk definitely did a number on him.
Yeah. I love that scene, and it was very vivid. Also, I just like I almost feel like if you put that to film, it would be funny.
Yeah,
it almost
he's
would
just
be,
like,
yeah.
What weapon do you choose? Bird. And it just goes, ah! And just like goes right to his face. Like,
That would be great.
Yeah.
yeah. And, but also I thought it was interesting. Like, how it was Court?
Yep.
He had like one eye, right? Or like one bad eye?
Yeah, Court's got a bad eye.
So he's like a one-eyed kind of giant.
Yep.
And then David fought him, so it was like David and Goliath kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
There
pretty
you
good.
go.
That's true. I did.
Picking up on more.
Yeah. Lots of little connections.
You never got that?
David's a hawk, and
Kills the big...
yeah, I mean, it's
Anyway.
there, but
So yeah, there are biblical... If you sit there and you look
Oh,
for
yeah.
them, it's
Oh, yeah.
through the whole thing.
I got like triggered early on, so I was just like, where are they?
So one of the reasons that I asked you earlier if you had seen Lost is that Lost is actually heavily inspired by the Dark Tower.
Oh, really?
that
And
makes a lot of
is-
sense.
Full of references to it.
I'm gonna have
That's
to go
probably why
back
it
and
blew
watch
everyone's
Lost
mind
now.
when it came out, because just like American television audiences are like, what do you mean it's not 30 minutes? I mean, there's no meaning at the end. What's happening? That guy just gets sucked into an airplane engine? Oh my God.
Yeah. So a lot of inspiration from Stephen King's universes
Oh, okay.
in Lost.
Interesting.
This whole sequence here, where Roland's telling Jake about his trial of manhood, stands in my mind as one of the most vivid scenes I remember from my childhood. It was that quintessential Western. I mean, I was 12 or 13 when I read it, so it was just the right age, like just that wanting to grow up and be a man yourself.
Right.
So an incredible sequence. We skipped over a little bit earlier. He also mentioned to Jake a time where he had been playing with his friend, They didn't play, but where he'd been working under Court with his friend Cuthbert. And they saw Hax, the cook, go and secretly try to sell out Gilead to this guy named Robeson, who it turns out works for the good man, John Farson. We learn later through the series that John Farson, or in the book rather, we learn that John Farson was responsible for the fall of Gilead. He was like a rebel king trying to overthrow the government.
Right.
So Hax is going to poison the entirety of Taunton, which is the
Province.
district
Yeah.
of Gilead that they lived in.
Okay.
And Roland turns him in. His father hangs him. But an interesting sequence and an interesting glimpse into the mind of the gunslinger, because we don't really get a lot of that in this book. You get much more of his character later on. This book is more telling us why the rest of the story matters. So, while Roland is telling his father this, Roland asks his father Roland's father asks Roland how he feels about this. And Roland says, I don't know, and comments that he was never really someone much concerned with how his feelings compared with others of his age group.
Sure.
And his father said, well, why did you do it? And he starts saying something about, oh, well, honor this and honor that. And his father says, if you did this for a notion as cheap as honor, I would rather see all of Taunton poisoned. Why did you really do it? And he said, because he hurt me. Because he lied and he deserved to die. And we see that Roland, although very dry and very methodical, we see that he is willing to make incredible sacrifices. But there's a heart in there that feels. There is emotion within Roland. He is a deeply romantic man. He just doesn't let that part out very often. It's part of why Jake was such an effective trap. Because...
So you're saying Jake was a trap?
Absolutely, Jake was a trap.
Oh, damn. All right.
Of course he was. The Man in Black left him there on purpose.
Yeah, it's true.
At the very place Roland was going to wake up.
Hit him with a bus, all for that. That's kind of...
It was a Cadillac, but yeah. Yeah, squished him. So they get through the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, Jake realizes that he's probably not going to make it out. That Roland's kind of just been dragging him along toward the end here. As Roland's been putting together that, yeah, Jake probably is a trap. That he's going to have to sacrifice Jake to get along. And so he and Jake get to the end of the railway where they have to abandon their handcar.
After fighting a bunch of lepers.
Yes, that's right. They
Yeah,
did fight the slow mutants.
Yeah.
That was an interesting whole sequence there.
It's kind of a random thing to come like so far into the book, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's these mutant people everywhere.
Oh, and they found like the abandoned like subway carts that was from like the little like civilization that was there or abandoned.
It was a subway station
Yeah.
that they found.
Station,
Yeah.
oh yeah. It's almost like this whole world is like where like your left socks go when you lose them.
Right?
Interesting.
Like
That's a great line. I like that.
Yeah.
That's
The world between the worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, that's Toadash.
We'll get there.
Soda ash.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yep, that's right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Just like I'm Dan. Same
And
deal.
oh yeah.
So, as they reach the end of the railway, Roland sees the Man in Black up above him, blocking the doorway, standing in the light. And Roland and Jake are trying to make it across all of the just leftover supports for this bridge. And they're trying to walk on it. It's crumbling around them, crumbling underneath them, and Jake slips. Jake slips and he holds on by a hand. What did you think was going to happen when Jake started to fall and Roland had to choose? What did you think he'd do?
He was perseverating over the decision so much. I was like, he might just fucking bye-bye.
Yeah.
Like with that. Especially like they just went through like the darkest dark and like the first spot of light. I think they were down there for like a long time. If it was
Days.
ever,
Yeah.
like days.
Probably a week or more.
Oh, it was the quote like you don't realize that you can hunger for light like you do food or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the first fucking light they see is like a hole in the ceiling of the cave, and the Man in Black is there like the French knight from the beginning of Monty Python. And I'd be like, God damn it, just let me the fuck out. And so I'd be like, I'll get the fuck out of here. Fuck this kid. It's not my kid.
Yeah, fair.
Right.
Hey, they weren't watching him. They leave you fucking in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
You leave your kid in the middle of the desert. Bad parents, And they were going to this Manhattan place. Seems like a bad place. Bad parents. I gotta go. I gotta get the fuck out of here. I mean, turns out it goes out and it's a place of death. You know, it's like a bone. It's like
Golgotha.
the place where Simba.
Golgotha of bones. Yep. Dead on.
Yeah, or the place from Lion King.
Yep.
Golgotha means the place of bones.
Yes, but he refers to it as a Golgotha of bones.
The place of bones of bones.
Yes.
Golgotha.
It's like the Nile River.
Golgotha,
the river.
Golgotha. Yeah, the Nile River.
Yeah, and so I didn't know. I didn't know if he was gonna like outright die though. There's definitely ambiguity as to whether he's like dead or not. Because he did like one of those like fuck you splash things into the water. So like maybe he's cool.
So as Jake's falling, well, Roland is forced to choose. He chooses the tower. As he always has, as he always will. He chooses the tower. He steps over Jake. Mother may I. And then ascends to the Man in Black. So as he's falling, Jake yells out, "Go then. There are other worlds than these."
Oh, so he's in on it.
What were your thoughts at that point?
I was kind of confused by the situation, to be honest.
That's
I
okay.
was like, is
That's
this
a totally
guy,
reasonable reaction.
And he was like, he sort of like come to the decision that like he's gonna like leave this kid. It seemed like he was like,
Started thinking of him as the boy.
yeah. Oh, that's a good the change from Jake to the boy.
Yeah.
Sort of dehumanizing him in a way.
Exactly. Yep.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's some sinister shit to yell as you fall down.
Yeah.
We've been trying to
So-
reach you about your car's extended warranty.
So go then, there are other worlds than these. Is just one of those lines from this book that stands
Just
out.
sticks
It's
with
well
you.
known amongst the fandom.
Yeah.
It's like the beginning line. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed.
Yeah, it's a good line.
It's a great line. It's a
good
great
t-shirt.
setup for a story. Like it's a
Yeah.
very concise, like introductory statement to a really good essay.
It is, yeah.
Like that's it. That covers all of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then we ascend with Roland from the darkness into the light as he goes from ignorance to information.
So it was like another biblical reference. Who was it? Jacob had to help me with this. Had to sacrifice his son on the mountain.
Oh yeah. Jacob was told by God
do
to-
it.
No, he was told by God to sacrifice
He
his
was
son,
gonna.
and he
The
was
angel
gonna.
was like,
That's
hold
true. Yeah,
up.
no, he was totally gonna.
He was
That's
gonna.
fair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which was the entire point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
interesting point.
You have to be willing to sacrifice everything to attain, like
Everything.
the greatest good, or
Yep.
however you want to interpret it. So, but but again, this is like it's following the same tracks, but it's sort of perverted. It's wearing like an old duster. It smokes a lot. It's so Roland's willing to sacrifice anything for truth.
Anything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or anyone.
So we see that
his tower.
Roland is alone. There is no one in Roland's life.
Mm-hmm.
He has a donkey for a very brief period of time.
It is brief.
And that's his only traveling
That'd
companion.
be for donkeys are probably like a lot of work.
I don't know. I've never had a donkey.
I mean, you gotta feed it, you gotta water it.
Yeah.
You gotta keep it brushed.
shit and piss
I
everywhere.
mean, you just let it eat. It's just a donkey.
Not
So
in the
You're in the
desert.
middle of the
Anywho.
desert. There's no grass.
He
What do
wasn't
you
in
do?
the desert yet. Tull was right on the edge of the desert.
Oh, okay.
He didn't make it that far in. Yeah, he didn't plan at all.
No, he didn't. So
He's not good at this.
he didn't expect a desert. He had never been that far. We'll get into how
it's-
far Roland
It's
has
the
traveled.
apotheosis of deserts.
It is. But he didn't
Everyone
know that
knows
yet.
about it.
So
There's a highway.
there is a highway.
There is a highway.
There is a highway, and you caught that.
Oh, okay. I just thought it was like weird
A lot
playing.
of interesting things,
Yeah.
right? Hey Jude.
I'm also like very
But
suspicious.
it's not the right lyrics of Hey Jude. Did you catch that?
I suck at music, so I didn't.
No?
I was just like, yes,
They
this
changed
is
them
Hey
a little
Jude.
bit.
Did they really? I didn't notice
in
that
the-
either.
It's Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better is the real lyrics. In the book, it's Hey Jude, don't... How the hell does it go?
And that'll
been
be our
too long.
copyright strike for this video. Thank you.
right. So anyway, they do change lyrics there a little bit. They see Roland's familiar with the name Exxon.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Exxon
Yeah.
oil.
We see some generators in the way station. There's an atomic powered well for whatever reason. So he goes from this darkness to the light. He joins the man in black in this Golgotha. And there the man in black reads him his fortune with tarot cards. And he turns each one over in sequence. And that's an interesting part of the book. So
I listened to that like 3 or 4 times. So I was like, oh, it's probably, once the end of the book. And 2, I was like, it was very dense. And I was like, all right, this is important. So I'm going to kind of laser focus on this a
The
little
book
bit.
ends with a huge info dump
and a hook.
and a hook. Yeah.
And
A good one.
if you can get all the way to the very end, that hook is so worth it.
That's what got me to keep reading after I finally finished the first book.
So he sets up the next book. He tells us a little bit about what we're going to see. He reads Roland's fortune. He tells him about the 3 that he will draw. He tells him the first is ridden by a demon, and that demon's name is Heroin. The second is a lady of shadows who contains multitudes. And the third is death. But not for you, gunslinger. Never for you. And then he gives Roland a vision. And he takes this gunslinger who's lived in a world that barely had electricity. They had lights, things like that, but that was about as far as it went.
They had a hamburger. That was pretty good.
They did have hamburgers.
In
yeah.
all of Gilead, there was one place that could make ice. They only used it on special occasions. That's mentioned much later, but doesn't really matter.
Not really a spoiler.
It's a tiny spoiler. I'll give you that nugget. So, at the end here,
Ruined.
it sets all of this series up. And the Man in Black takes this gunslinger who's basically never experienced electricity other than, the lights in Gilead around, and shows him civilization. Men landing on the moon, flying in airplanes. He shows him a subatomic particle and then takes him in scale from that subatomic particle to the scale of the universe, able to see the strings of galaxies. And then in a blinding white light, Roland passes out. That was a trippy part of the book.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah,
for
it was.
me as a kid, I still find it trippy and weird, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that whole thing? What were your thoughts there as the Man in Black was unfolding this prophecy and vision?
I liked it because, first of all, these guys have been like adversaries the whole book, and they're just like sitting by a fucking campfire at this point because they're tired. Or at least Roland is. He's just like, this sucks.
Yep.
And he can't kill the guy because every time he shoots at him, he misses for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like the Man in Black is like a concept and not like a person, or like
Interesting.
an idea, or he's otherworldly.
Sure.
And it turns out Roland is too, from what he's telling him. And as far as the 0 to infinity thing, I think what has made Roland like good at his place in the world he inhabits is his, it's not creativity, it's doing the thing.
It's the total opposite of creativity. It's that he takes the world as it is.
Yeah.
He accepts anything given to him, and he can do that.
And but also it seems like part of him, perhaps that a deep emotional part that he doesn't necessarily always register that he's experiencing,
Sure.
is reaching out. Like he wants more. He wants truth. He wanted the truth of life and death that Allie got, but he wants to see who sits on the throne, and he's seeking out this tower, and I guess careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah,
Because
very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, Roland awakens, and it's been many, many, many years. The Man in Black is dead. He's a skeleton. And Roland takes his jawbone, because he had lost the first jawbone under the mountain with Jake during the fight with the slow mutants. It had slipped. So he takes the new jawbone from the Man in Black and sets out from the mountains down toward the coast and passes out on the coast of the Western Sea. And that's where we leave the gunslinger at the end of his first entry. So overall, this story sets up this entire saga.
I've often thought of this not as book one, but as the intro book.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is book one.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's probably where most people run into their issues reading this.
Yeah.
Is that like the story structure is abnormal. And
Very much
that,
so.
Like songs and yada, 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 you have, like rising action and then a little release of the tension.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like after he like kills everyone in that town, it just kind of goes up. It might plateau a little bit with like less interesting parts, but it just kind of keeps adding and like asking, like putting crap, like, and you're just like, what the hell does that mean? Why is there a subway station in the middle of this mountain?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any fucking sense. And if you just can't like go, if you can't be like Roland and just take the world as it is and keep moving forward, you're going to get stuck. And maybe that was on purpose. I don't know. But so it's just kind of like a wedge going up of intensity and questions asked with no answer. And, they start talking about this old kingdom, from his childhood. And it's like all these questions. And it's like there was this war between the kingdoms that they just go, yeah, there was a war. And they don't say anything else. And you're just like, what do you mean? Why are there castles? They have guns. I don't understand. And then you just got to keep going. So, if you kind of need answers right away, it's going to be kind of an annoying read, I feel like.
That's true.
Very
will tell anybody who's starting this series, you will not get answers right away.
No, you don't get a lot of answers in the first book.
No.
You get just enough answers right at the very end to get you hooked to keep going.
Yeah.
So the crux of this story is Roland's desire to reach and to claim the Dark Tower, or to enter it and climb to it. That's what he's trying to accomplish. What do you think the Dark Tower is?
Well, they said in some words in the book.
He mentions it. He talks about it.
He said it was like a nexus, which is like a connecting point.
Yep.
And if this world seems like a place where the crumbs fall through the floorboards of other dimensions, I suspect that's like the main interchange of all the other dimensions.
Interesting
Theory. Okay.
That's a great theory.
Yeah.
That's well structured, and that makes a lot of sense logically.
So the way you're saying that means it's wrong.
So this saga, as King wrote it, he made it abundantly clear, or at least claimed many, 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 many times, he didn't know how it was going to end. He didn't know where it was going to end. He, in fact, says in the afterword of book 3 that you must prepare yourself for the very real notion that Roland may never reach the Dark Tower. I strongly encourage you for the following books to listen to the entire foreword and the entire afterword.
Yeah.
They contain nuggets of story that aren't in the rest of the books, including King's actual thoughts on the books as he wrote them.
Okay.
It's fascinating. It is.
Sure is. The Dark Tower has, for me, stood as one of the most well-structured and well-put-together sagas, stories, and universes.
Taken as a whole, I would absolutely agree with you.
I think of, in my mind, of the entire story as one single book.
Yeah. Which is how epics like this are often written.
Yeah.
That's what Lord of the Rings' entire deal is. It's one story just split up into 3 books. Actually 5 books for the original release, but it's not original release, but the books are split into sub-books.
Yes, the original way they published was bizarre. Kind of like this was, actually. Yeah. So I had you read the revised edition because this edition is just terrible.
Oh, is it?
The writing's awful.
Oh, is it?
He was 19.
He wrote it when he was 19, and he said that his mind returned to this place, to the gunslinger. Over the span of many years, he found himself constantly returning to learn more, to retell these stories, and to expand them. So in terms of your idea of a nexus, right? All of King's stories are interconnected to the Dark Tower. That's the whole idea. They're all kind of contained in the same universe, more or less. We'll get more into that as we go. You'll understand that a little bit more clearly as we go. So the next book is called The Drawing of the Three. We get a little bit of what's going to happen in that story in this one. I love The Drawing of the Three. It introduces my favorite character in all of fictional media. We'll get into him later. But what do you expect out of The Drawing of the Three? What do you think is going to happen? Where do you think Roland's going? He's on a beach, passed out.
Well, the man Black gave him like a quest sort of, didn't he? Like, you will seek, was the man without time or something?
So in his prophecy, as he's going through, he tells Roland that he's going to draw his 3, that he's going to have his adventures. He tells Roland that it was him who had tricked his mother. We learn that Walter and Martin have been the same person all the way through. That is something a lot of readers miss in this, that Walter and Martin were the same character.
I missed that the first couple times.
It is revealed more explicitly in a later book, but it is explicit in this if you follow those nuggets.
Yeah.
So where do you think Roland's going on the next part of his journey?
Well, he seems fascinated with the tower, so obviously that's going to play some role in it. He sort of made a deal with the Man in Black, you know. Do you think the Man in Black was he supposed to be death or something like that?
Interesting.
Because he didn't seem like he had a lot of like kind of the Lord of Lies thing going on, which is like very much like the Gaunter O'Dim character in The Witcher 3.
Cool.
Okay.
You know, it's like he's sort of like you can't really catch him. He's not someone you beat in a fight.
Right.
You know, he's just kind of like the intelligence gone wild. You know,
Yeah,
sure.
You know, just sort of making deals and hanging you with your own desires and everything like that. So I didn't know if, you know, and he also doesn't seem to be, he makes it pretty clear before he turns into a skeleton that he is an agent of the true bad guy. He called him the Crimson King.
They did call him the Crimson King.
That's
Good
who.
catch.
That's who the child Sylvia was impregnated with. That was supposed to be the father. So you know they're setting up the big bad. Good work for the end of the first book. You know, it's a good place to put it.
Yep.
So, you know, so if Roland does nothing, there's still antagonists out in the world that can come and get him, cause issues. But, you know, he'd already traveled all the way from the eastern seaboard across what I assume is the United States. I just kind of assume that because I'm an American, so everything's about me.
Right.
And so he makes it. And I feel like if I walked from, you know, East Coast to the West Coast, I'd be tired too. So I too would pass out for 12 years. And he's like old and he's got a beard. Is like, there's no training montage. He's just like old and fucked. And he goes.
So he passes out on the Western Sea. And that is where we'll pick up on our next book, which will be The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. Took many, many years between the publication of this book and The Drawing of the Three before it happened. For those people who listened or who read this book series as it came out, it took almost 30 years between the first book and the last.
Oh my! First of all, how long between the first and second book?
Exact dates fail me at the moment, especially because The Gunslinger was published 9 different ways.
That's fair, yeah.
Roughly
But
a couple years. We're talking
10 years,
10
12 years?
What the fuck? This book is such a cock tease. That is like
Right.
criminal.
Imagine waiting 12
Oh my
years
God, this
for the
book is-
resolution to that.
I would just be like, this.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank God.
Between
I was about to call it a police.
the first official publication of The Gunslinger, which was 1982. It was 5 years later that The Drawing of the Three was published.
Okay, so only 5 years.
It's still kind of long.
That is.
It is. It was another 4 years before the next one.
He's taking a sweet time.
The second to third is much less troubling than the first to second, because
Yeah.
the whole book is just like an arrow being drawn back and then not released.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Tune in next time, ass face," and he'd just be like, "What?"
Yeah, that's a really good metaphor.
That is how the book ends.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, what am I reading? What the fuck is what?
Yep.
And it just blows your mind, and it moves on. It was 6 years between books 3 and 4. Can you imagine?
wow.
3 years between books 3 and 4.
Wow.
It would just be like, it's like enough time to have a family.
Right.
It is.
You'd just be like,
I have children.
"Oh my God,
younger
honey,
than
I'm a
that.
gunslinger." She's like, "What the fuck are
And
you talking
as
about?"
you might guess, there's an insane cliffhanger.
Oh yeah.
So we were just left there. The readers at the time were just left there. Thankfully, when I read, the entire series was out. But
And then it was another
Let's just
6
be a lesson.
years.
Early adoption of anything is never worth it. Wait until it's all done. All the bugs are.
Yeah.
Get like a 2-gen back phone for like $30. It's just as good.
And I apologize to the 3 of you who are still here this late. It was actually 22 years between the first book and the last book.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a fair amount of
I
time.
had factored Wind Through the Keyhole into my head.
Okay.
So the series can drink alcohol legally.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Good.
So I want to thank you both for hanging out with me. I want to thank you for reading this series a few times now. And Jared, thank you so much for reading this. I hope you really enjoyed it.
I had a lot of fun. I was nervous. I appreciate you including me, and I don't begrudge you when you edit me fully out of the podcast.
Yeah, we're just going to hard cut right here.
Yeah. End of frame right there.
Yeah.
David will be talking to nobody for most of the time.
But thank you so much. I had a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
of course. I can't wait to see what you think of the rest of this series.
Oh boy.
This is very much not a great intro to what this series is really about. It's just the only way to do it.
It's so not. That's the thing. It's just, I wish this book was 2 chapters in the beginning of the rest of the series. That's what it could have been.
And it's like you and I were just talking about with the Andromeda Strain and the Andromeda Evolution.
Yeah.
Written many years later, ghost written for Michael Crichton. Long story. But just the Andromeda Strain is a kind of dry, kind of uninteresting.
Very slow.
Nothing really happens. And then the Andromeda Evolution
takes it up to 11.
a whole different world.
It's crazy.
So next time we will be reading The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. Feel free to read along with us if you've never read this series. Otherwise, thanks so much for hanging out with us, everybody. For The Risen Empire, I'm David.
I'm Ethan.
I'm Jared.
Long days and pleasant nights.
See you guys.